my name's Navraj, and I'm an alcoholic. So it's not to do with how much you drink or how often you drink. It's about, are you in control of your drinking? Because I was that guy at the end of the wedding party that you couldn't get rid of. The more I progressed in my drinking, the more I was consuming, and the consequences and the impact it was having on me, my family, and everybody around me was starting to increase. By the end of my drinking, I was suicidal, even though I wasn't drinking every day.
Hi, welcome to Change the Suit. My name's Bal.
And my name's Taj.
There was a pause again, Taj. There was a pause again.
I think there's something wrong with the internet. It's not that I forget my name every
Yeah.
time.
Sorry, Navraj. This is like an ongoing thing where I have to take the mick out of Taj for forgetting her name as we do the introductions. Okay.
There was a pause. There was definitely a pause.
Whatever.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm liking this guest already. Okay, so today we have a special guest. We always have a special guest. I need to stop saying special guests. But anyway, we do have a guest, and that is Navraj Dhesi. Now, we got in touch with Navraj because we'd seen a few little bits on his social media in regards to his journey with alcohol. Now, this is a topic that we've spoken about a few times on the podcast in the past, should I say. And it's something that comes up every so often when we're talking to people in the community. So we need to refresh and find out and hear more stories and raise awareness. So, hi, Navraj, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. How are you guys?
Yeah, good. Yeah, good, thank you. Now, in regards to your journey, Navraj, why are we talking to you today? What's your history in regards to this specific topic? And I should have said, Navraj is also a founding member of No More Pretending, which I forgot to say because we had an argument attached.
I was going to say we had ages that we were talking about that and you didn't even bring it up.
I know. It was as soon as Navraj agreed with me that you were wrong in your stop again. So that just took me off focus. Okay, bringing it in. Okay, Navraj. So can you give us a bit of an introduction to yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Navraj, and I'm an alcoholic, so I'm in recovery myself. So I got to a point where I started to struggle with alcohol and I needed help. I reached out and I got sober through a 12-step fellowship, and I've been in recovery for 12 years now. So that's 12 years without any drink or drugs. And a lot of the voluntary work that I do through No More Pretending is about raising awareness that there actually is help and support available. And it's all about signposting and reducing the barriers to entry so people from our community can get into recovery. Because one thing we find is when we look at the stats and the figures, we're one of the most underrepresented groups within all modalities of recovery. So that's kind of through the NHS or statutory services.
What does it mean to be struggling with alcohol?
No, I think that's a great question. Because as soon as I say I'm an alcoholic, I think everybody's got their own stereotype. They have that image straight away.
This is really bad. As soon as you said it, I was thinking, he doesn't look like an alcoholic. And that's wrong to think because it could be anyone but it's just mindset, isn't it? Yeah.
Exactly. And then that's the point. I think that's why I always introduce myself as an alcoholic, because it kind of really breaks the ice as to,
It does. As soon as you said it, I was like, oh, okay, that's out there.
Well, yeah, if anybody's going to give a talk, in my professional life, if anybody ever gives a talk, my first question is always, why are we going to listen to this guy? And for me, if we're going to talk about alcohol, I had a problem with it. So that's why maybe you might want to have a listen. So, but yeah. When I say I'm an alcoholic, I mean a couple of specific things. So the way I was taught to define alcoholism, it's anybody that loses control of their drinking. So it's not to do with how much you drink or how often you drink. It's about, are you in control of your drinking? Because although I'm an alcoholic, I was never a daily drinker. And a lot of people might have that image of that person that drinks every day. But for me, once I started drinking, I couldn't stop. So, it was one drink was always too many. I was that guy at the end of the wedding party that you couldn't get rid of. And, for me, from the beginning, I was never a 1 or 2 drink kind of guy. I'd always drink to excess. And, when I got into recovery, what I was taught is that by itself isn't a big problem. If when you start drinking, you can't stop, it's not a big problem. If you say no to the first drink, the real problem was.
Yeah, sorry. I think you're about to answer the question I was going to say, because if again, I assumed it was someone that just consistently was drinking, and it's that control. Even if after one drink you don't have that control,
but that's after the first drink, isn't it? So if you say no to the first drink, it wouldn't be an issue. The issue was I could never stay stopped. I could stop anytime I wanted, but I could never stay stopped. So, I could go weeks, maybe a month or two without it, but then I'd always end up going back to it. And the more I progressed in my drinking, the more I was consuming, and the consequences and the impact it was having on me, my family, and everybody around me was starting to increase. Because what people don't realize is alcoholism, it's a family illness. Obviously I was a very visible part of that illness because it was me that was consuming the alcohol, but it impacted my parents, my wife, my brothers, everybody around me. They say for every alcoholic, there's 10 close relationships that are impacted by it.
Navraj, can I just go back a bit, because that is one part that we're going to definitely touch on, because the impact on people around you. Was there something that got you starting to drink, or was it just a social activity? Was there anything prior to that
Trigger
that got you to any trigger to get you there?
No, so it was a social thing. So a bit more about me. So I live in Birmingham now, but as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm from the north originally. So I grew up in Bradford. So I'm the youngest of 4 boys.
I thought you were from Birmingham. I
don't have a Brummie accent. But so I'm from the north, a much smaller Punjabi community up in Bradford. Nothing compared to what we've got in the Midlands. Grew up youngest of 4 boys. There's a bit of an age gap between me and my brother, so I'm the baby of the family. But not only the baby of the family, I'm the baby of the generation. So I was doted on, not just by my brothers, but, I was always close to my chachi, all my cousins. I was the baby. So, I was surrounded in love, because a lot of times people think there must be some traumatic event which leads us to drink. But for me, growing up, family, you used to see the elders drinking, and that's what we wanted to do. I wanted to be one of the elders, and that's what we thought that natural progression of growing up was, was drinking. Saw it a lot in social settings. On the whole, there's no real examples of alcoholism in my family. My brothers, my dad, what you'd call moderate drinkers. Some of my cousins maybe a bit heavier, but nothing where you'd say problematic. Yeah, I got to a point where I'd drink and I was unable to control it, and that was quite evident from early in my drinking, because I'd drink and other people would drink and they'd lose control and say, oh, I don't like this. For me, it brought me ease. As I drank, it helped quieten my head, because growing up, although I was surrounded by all this love, I always felt a bit like the black sheep of the family. I always felt a bit distant. And that's nothing to do with any way I was treated, because I was just surrounded by love. That was my own interpretations of my surroundings. And that, I'd drink and it'd bring me peace at the beginning. But then obviously that peace would take more and more.
So it's to do with mental health, and mental health isn't necessarily what's out there, it's what you're feeling. So you said it was more mental health impacts, and that's what drove you to.
But actually, that's a tough one, because you've just said it yourself. You were surrounded by love, what you would expect it to be. But then
why did you feel who was the black sheep of the family?
Oh, we're going to start analysing you.
No, that's fine. Because obviously you also have to see this. This is me retrospectively putting a story to a journey that I went through. So, I drank. Not because I thought I want to quiet, I want to help my mental health. I drank because that was what was seen in the community. Yeah, and it's a big part of our identity. One thing that I've learned in recovery is that the journey of a male and a female in drinking is always different. As a male, I learned to drink in a social setting with my brothers, with my dad, with my friends. And, I was able to test my limits in a safe environment. Whereas what we find in the female community is not that they're not allowed to drink. In some cases where they're not, people will still drink, and if they don't have that social context, they drink quite dangerous amounts quite quickly. So sometimes you can see actually that female journey in drinking can accelerate quite quickly.
Is that because men are more socially accepted for drinking? It's just a thing that guys do, and whereas women, they are starting to drink a little bit more socially, but not still at the point of where it's accepted with men. Do you think that's still the case, or?
I think it's hard to generalize on such a big community, but I think on the whole, it's a bit more accepted than it was when I was younger that women drink. But you still get cases where actually, no, you shouldn't, or you shouldn't be drinking in this setting. And I think people will still drink, or if people aren't allowed, they'll experiment, but they'll experiment without them safety barriers in place, and that can be quite a dangerous thing, because we find a similar journey between the women and people from a Islamic background. Obviously, in Islam, it's forbidden, so you're not meant to drink, and they have that same. When you try hide it, people will still experiment, but without them safety barriers in place, people can get themselves into trouble quite quickly.
Is that with men as well? Then that's a really interesting way. thing that you've just added there, is that with men that are from Islam, because they aren't?
Yeah, definitely. So I think generally from an
Yeah.
Islamic background, male and female, I think in our community it tends to be the female, but it does happen for some males as well, where you may have a quite strict religious family, because I've met people that are, to look at, Dari Singh, but have had problems with drinking alcohol, but you just wouldn't, just looking at them, you'd never think, to be honest. But what they've done is, for some reason or other, they've started to drink and they've quickly found themselves in trouble.
See, but it's all to do, because now you're just blowing all the things that I had in my head, like you drink every day and you've thrown that out of the window, and you said that you were loved, so the trauma thing, that's out of the window as well. So you're really breaking everything that I thought that led up to the
We're very square people. You've just opened up that square. That's the point, isn't it?
I'm really glad you said that, because that's the attitude I had going into it, and that's what almost killed me. By the end of my drinking, I was suicidal, even though I wasn't drinking every day. I'd drink and I wouldn't want to wake up, because it felt like pain of being me was just too much. It felt to me that living sober was the painful part and the drinking was putting it at ease. And I thought to myself, I can't be an alcoholic. I don't drink every day. I'm educated. I've got a good job, family. I was married. At the end of my drinking, my wife was expecting our first child.
I was really confused.
Exactly. So how could I? But what you realize is that alcoholism is not defined by these outside characteristics. It's about, do you have control over your drinking? The two simple things to ask are, once you start, can you stop? And when you try stop, can you stay stopped? And I couldn't, once I started, from a young age, everyone knew I drink quite excessively. But what I didn't realize is that I could never stay stopped, because over any given time that I was away from the alcohol, my head would start saying to me, oh, it'll be different this time. You'll be okay. Do something differently, or you're blowing it all out of proportion. Or I'd look and go, look, I'm working, I'm providing all these things. And all these things were actually not true. I'd crossed that line into alcoholism many years ago. I just hadn't admitted it to myself.
Can I ask, in that case, what got you to the point where you realized you were an alcoholic then? Because if you weren't drinking excessively, what made you then think, oh, actually, I'm an alcoholic? At
the end, it was them suicidal thoughts. You get to the point where you can't even rationalize it. You realize that normal people don't drink and not want to wake up the next day. Normal people don't have to hide and control their drinking. Although I wasn't drinking every day, I was drinking a lot, and I was trying to hide it from other people. I think the best way I've ever heard it described was, when I was enjoying my drinking, it was out of control. When I was controlling my drinking, I never enjoyed it. Yeah.
Can you give me a scenario? I think this just from my own head. When you were drinking privately and hiding it, how were you doing? How was it when everyone was out of the house or upstairs in your room? What was
why? And why as well on that point?
I'm an IT consultant, so I traveled a lot with work. So most of the time I'd work outside of the city that I lived in. So a lot of time in hotels. So I was actually by myself, so I could freely drink. But, my wife would start to find bottles in my suitcase, because as an alcoholic, we're always the last to realize we got a problem. I thought I was being really smart. Then I was like, wait a minute, I'm hiding empty bottles in my suitcase that my wife unpacks. It's the little things like that we don't realize. And the why of it's an interesting one, because even with myself, the first question when I got into recovery is, why am I like this? And the truth is, people drink for so many different reasons. So many reasons bring us into it. It's about the reasons where we kind of lose control. And that's what recovery is about. It's about addressing them. As I went through that 12-step process of change, it was about looking at my past and looking at, actually, wait a minute, looking at the resentments that I was holding on to, the fears that I had. And it was kind of looking at my past through a very specific lens to kind of understand the things that were making me drink, to be honest, the things that I couldn't let go.
Can I just pick up on this point? Because you did say earlier, look, it was retrospective. You've had a brilliant upbringing. You've had a lot of love. You're the youngest, But it's this retrospective. And I think, once we start analysing anything, even with our own lives, and I've started definitely since we've been doing the podcast, analysing certain bits where I'm like, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of it like that. What was it that made you, firstly, like you said before, feel like the black sheep of the family? And what were you retrospectively now? And you've repeated it now. What was it that you were picking up on in that case from the past?
I suppose growing up, you realize now that I felt that disconnection from everyone. At the time, I couldn't put words to it. It was just almost like a feeling. It's like do you know when you have white noise on in the background? It was like this kind of low level anxiety that just kind of existed in the past. But it was only through recovery that I was able to translate that and go, oh, that's what that was. When you grow up in a certain context, that's what's normal to you. It's when you get out of that you realize, like, oh, not everybody feels like that. And I suppose as I connect with my family and stuff and realize that not everybody felt as disconnected as I did, and that was me. And I suppose that black sheep thing is a retrospective term that I put to it, but at the time I did always feel, just say different. I always felt that people understood life, and I kind of didn't get the rule book.
I don't know, you might not be able to answer this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So some people, they might go through the same thing as you, feeling disconnected. Why do some people choose to, you might not be able to answer this, but like I said, I'm going to ask, why do some people choose alcohol and other people just don't choose alcohol to go to almost numb the pain?
But he didn't numb the pain with alcohol, though. It's a social thing, and this is the thing. It just turned into that. Sorry, I've just totally taken your answer, Navraj. I don't know if that is.
No, that's exactly the point. So it's not that I went to the medicine cabinet and thought, oh, here's some alcohol, this will help it. It was just something socially that I did, that I found that actually, wait a minute, I feel at ease when I drink. So I'll drink more, and I did drink more. So
do you think social drinking is then? It was in the media about a month ago. Do you think social drinking is a problem because of what you've just said? Social drinking per se shouldn't be a problem, but then if it then turns into, I don't know, I'm analysing something, perhaps I've gone too far in. I'll ask you a question later once I've figured it out in my own head.
I suppose if you look at it like this, I'm one of 4. I've got 3 brothers that can socially drink without a problem. They can have a drink, put it down, and that's the end of it. Whereas me, even today, after 12 years of recovery, we could all be sat there, I still have beer. I can still tell you whose drinks whose. And it's weird. It's like an automatic reaction. We were at an event a couple of months ago, and somebody said, oh, where's my drink? And I said, oh, yours is that one there. And I could tell everybody whose, and it was just weird. Everyone was looking at me, and I was like, yeah, I might have had a problem with alcohol in the past. And they're all like, I can't do it with chess or cards or numbers or anything useful, but yeah. But
the lottery.
Exactly. But so I've got 3 brothers that, that can drink perfectly fine, whereas I can't. We grew up in the same setting and so forth. And I think it's quite an individual thing. And it's something that I naturally found. I think if I'd gone down a different path and found drugs, that would have been the thing as well. So it's not as though I thought this is going to solve a problem for me. It just became the answer to a question that I didn't realize I was asking.
Can I, by the way, this conversation is going in directions I wasn't planning to go in, but hey, it is what it is, it's conversation. See, every so often my husband says to me, you've got a bit of an addictive personality.
Yeah.
Where, I can start something and I'll be like, okay, now leave me. It's like, I don't like going out, but if I'm out, then I don't like coming back home. That sort of thing. Or if there's anything, if you're in Vegas and, you won't get away from the table, that kind of thing. Do you think that is actually a thing? I don't know. Is that a thing, an addictive personality? Do you think you're part of our crew then in that case?
I think we label things now, we use terms like addictive. We've all become armchair psychologists. Everybody knows addictive personality, or you've got OCD. And having done work in this field, I've met people with OCD, and it's harrowing to see somebody have some of that so debilitating. Being cleanliness I think it's a community thing. We all have that thing. We grew up like, oh, everything's got to have its place and stuff. And we mislabel these things. But that addictive personality, I think, I'm an addict. Yeah. So as an alcoholic, I'm an addict. I got addicted to alcohol. And when I stopped, sugar took that role for a while because I wasn't drinking and my body was so used to sugar. So, I almost had to apply the same principle where they say, say no to the first drink. I had to say no to the first biscuit or the packet would disappear.
Oh, that's me too.
Yeah. When I stopped sugar, I felt shaky and trembly. I didn't realise at first, but it can, it's almost getting.
This is us totally being the armchair psychologist, but as soon as you said it, I'm like, yeah, you're right.
Right. We say label, everyone almost seems to be labeling each other, blah, blah, blah. But do you think labels also help you deal with the situation, the issue as well? Once you know what the problem is, for example, if someone
because you said, oh, I'm an alcoholic. Now we all had that label on you.
Like, for example, a dyslexic. If you label them a dyslexic, now you know that they've got a different way of processing things, so you can support that dyslexic person. do you think there is a positive also to labeling as well?
So, sorry, on the labeling, I'll go back to, I think 100% labeling is a good thing. It can have a downside to it. I suppose what I was saying about before is misappropriating terms. So, like, a good example of it is my daughter's 11. She came from school and she said, "Oh, my friend's having a breakdown." I was like, I can promise you your friend is not having a breakdown. Do you know what I mean? Like, we pick up, like, it's like hyperbole, isn't it? We pick up these terms and we use them so casually, but actually,
it's very serious.
There's things underneath it, isn't there?
I'll tell my husband that when he says it. Don't worry, Navraj, I'll sort it out. No, but it's true. And it's a good point. It's the language. What language are we using? It's a really important point there.
And this is one of the challenges we have in this space, because alcoholic's a very loaded term. I'm very comfortable with it because of the fellowship that I came from. It's part of, how we solve it, whereas the NHS will not use it. The NHS will not use the term alcoholic. They use, I have alcohol use disorder, which sounds a bit cooler, but AUD they call it.
To say that long first.
But what do you think about that? Because you have labelled yourself an alcoholic, and we automatically assume that. Whereas if you had said the NHS version, we'd be like, "Oh, okay, so what is that?" Whereas you've gone in head first with that one.
Exactly. So the AUD, I think for me, a big part of my recovery was being able to say the word alcoholic, but to say that word, we had to have a new definition for it. And when I got into recovery, my sponsor says, "Nav, everything you think you know about drinking, recovery, these things, let's put them to the side so we can have a fresh experience with it." And the first thing I was taught is, what is an alcoholic? Because in the beginning, I'd have put my hand up and said anything. I'd have said I'm a unicorn because I was just desperate for help. Yeah. But saying I'm an alcoholic was fine because there was a room full of people saying it. But then my sponsor says, "Okay, what does it mean to be an alcoholic?" And going back to that simple definition, it's simply somebody that once they start drinking can't stop. And when they try stop, can't stop. Yeah.
And go on.
So that can't stay stopped. And, over my years in recovery, talking to other people coming in, I think that always just the look on their face when they realize that, oh, wait a minute, I thought an alcoholic was this. I thought it was a park bench drunk, or, in our language, we've got terms like umly. I thought it was somebody falling over that drank every day. And it's like, wait a minute. So when I say I'm an alcoholic, people get really taken back, because even in my drinking, I still looked smart. I wore a shirt and tie to work. I was progressing very quickly in my career. And it was things like these misinterpretations of the facts that were killing me. Because if I hadn't got to that breaking point, who knows if I'd have got into recovery? Because a lot of times when you say to somebody alcoholic, they have this and say, "No, I can't be that. That's not me." So there's a danger to it as well. So that's why, for me, my journey of recovery side, when I connected with another alcoholic, this was somebody else that had been through that same process. Because at the end, everybody wanted me to stop drinking. My wife, my family, my employer, everybody were like...
That's what I was going to ask you. When did it start? When other people were starting to pick up, okay, this isn't right, you need to go and get support. When did that start, and how was it, whoever approached you, how was it approached?
So I stopped drinking at 29. So towards my late 20s, friends would pick up on it. But what I'd do is I was like a social chameleon. I'd mix with different groups. So, one night I'm with these guys, one night I'm with these guys. So you'd never actually see how much I was drinking over a week. Or, my friends became the ones that drank like me. If somebody started to point out my drinking, I changed my friend circle. They weren't my kind of people. So, and what you realize is over a period of time, I was just deteriorating, and I was just finding company to enable my drinking. So the more I drank, I had to socialize with people that drank like that. But certainly, I got married at 27. My wife realized it from early on, saying, like, just take it easy. And, the usual stuff, like, everyone else just takes it easy. What's going on? Do you know what I mean? You do it like a sport. And, you'd see the shame and the embarrassment at the end of parties. And, we have a lot of social functions. And a lot of times we have alcohol there. And if it was there, I'd always drink to excess. And it's not necessarily that I'd cause a scene, but my wife wouldn't want to see me like that. To me, my parents wouldn't want to see.
How did your wife and your parents deal with it? I don't know if that's the right way of asking the question, but how did it impact them, and how did they move forward with you on the issue?
I think the way my drinking impacted my family mostly was that I was absent. So as an IT consultant, I'd always be working away. But even when I was back, I was always out doing something. So I was a very absent member of the family. I wasn't that person you turn to because I wasn't that reliable. Do you know what I mean? So if I look at my relationships with nephews and nieces through that period, it's very scattered. That it's just, it wasn't there, you know, I wasn't putting into them relationships. And when I first got into recovery, the shame and embarrassment was more around what were people going to say that I've stopped drinking rather than I'd asked for help, because it was such a part of my identity. I was like, who's Navi without the drink? So when I got into recovery, I didn't tell my wife or my family. I just, you know, I had this one episode which was particularly bad, and I can go into it later on, but got into recovery, and for the first 3-4 months, I just lied. I pretended I was taking an evening class. So I'd go to recovery meetings, and then around Christmas time.
Why did you feel ashamed of getting support? And you're trying to now ease off the alcohol, so you would think that
and plus they wanted you to, because they've commented as well.
I think you're here to challenge us today because you've thrown all things at
either that or I'm a complete lunatic. Do you know what I mean?
Nah.
The point was, it was that embarrassment of I didn't know who I was without the alcohol. And the other part of it was I'd made promises for too many times. I'd said I'd stop and not stopped. And, you know, I'd said sorry 1,000. Sorry didn't mean anything in our house anymore. They're just sick of hearing it also. That was the reason. But when I did tell my wife, she just kind of laughed and said, why would I not want you to? She was like, are you mental? Why would I not want you to stop drinking? And with my parents, you know, my dad's of that generation that are very muted in that sense. It was kind of a good thing. It was a good nod. But we've never, you know, even after 12 years, we never really properly talk about it. They're really happy that I don't drink. And I think they don't always understand that. Obviously, as part of recovery, I still go to meetings. You know, what I did in the beginning, I still do now. Once an alcoholic, I'll always be an alcoholic. I can never safely consume alcohol ever again. So I still do the same things.
Can I ask right now? So you've said you're 12 years since you started the journey with the recovery. Do you you don't touch a drop of alcohol? I'm assuming now, because it would be the same sort of cycle. Is that correct in assuming that?
Yeah. So I'm 100% abstinent, and for me, I've seen too many examples of friends that I've thought after 5 years, 6 years, actually, I'll be all right now. But very quickly from after having that first drink, they're back to where they were, you know, 5 years prior.
And have you, sorry, on that question that you said earlier in regards to you didn't know who you were without the drink, do you think you've realised who you are through the recovery? I
think that's the essence of recovery. It's a journey of becoming the person I was meant to be. You know, through my drinking, I wore these masks. You know, I tried to be what I thought the world wanted me to be, and none of it was really me. The problem was the masks got too comfortable, and I lost who was underneath it. So to take it off was just, I was full of fear and so forth. But going through that process, it's been about actually finding the Nav I was meant to be. And that's a daily thing. That's why recovery is continuous. There's no end point to it. It's a daily journey of being the best version of me rather than try to be something that I wasn't.
How can you help someone that you know is an alcoholic and won't accept support? How do you get through to that person that they need that help? Is there a way, or is it when they're ready?
So through no more pretending, the amount of family members that I speak to, on the whole, it's 90% family members that will always reach out and 10% the actual person that wants to stop. And, you know, the number one question, you know, how can you help someone else? And for me, it was connecting with somebody else that had been through that same journey and making me realize, oh, wait a minute, that's me. You know, that I'm exactly like that. But you do come across people that just, look, thanks for the talk, you know, great news on your journey, but I'm not like that. I'm okay.
Yeah.
But, you know, a lot of people will say, you know, you can't help someone that doesn't want to be helped. But for me, I always tell them my story and try connect to at least plant the seed of recovery and to try change their mindset around what an alcoholic is. And on the whole, I'll normally get a call or, you know, within 6 months, they'll get to a point where, you know, after a binge or a session or stuff, they'll reach out and go, maybe I need some help. Because a lot of the times people's drinkings nowadays is episodic. So mine was, I was a big binge drinker, but the binges were getting bigger and bigger and closer together. And that's what a lot of times when I speak to somebody, they're like, I'm exactly like that. And they're like, but I didn't realize you could be an alcoholic and be a binge drinker. I was like, no, alcoholism's about control. If you've lost control, that's when you're an alcoholic. But I can never say somebody else is an alcoholic. It's a self-diagnosis thing. I can only say I'm an alcoholic based on my own drinking.
This might sound like a really dumb question considering where we are in the conversation, but how do you know that you've lost control? Because is it before? I'm sure you've answered it before, but I just want to sort of, in my head, if someone just carries on drinking because it's that social thing, everyone around them's drinking, it's not the fact that, after a certain amount, they're like, okay, just carry on. But what is that point in your head where you're like, actually, even before that first drink, I've lost control? Is that a silly question? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's a conscious thing that you go into. I could look back and realize that I'd drink even when I didn't want to. And that's when I realized I was in hell. And sometimes I'd promise people, look, I won't have a drink and stuff. And I'd go away and I'd be in tears with a glass in my hand going, how am I back here? Yeah. How have I not been able to say no? And I think it's very difficult from people that are outside that circle. So if you don't drink or have a problem with alcohol, you just see something like, how can you not put a fluid down? It's a fluid in a glass. How can you not put that down?
That's like having that piece of chocolate. You're like, no, I better have it. It's almost like that, but obviously you don't get the side effects that you do with alcohol. But you still go for that chocolate.
But you do get side effects. That's the problem. That's the problem. There is if you have anything in excess, it's a problem, isn't it? That's the issue here. In regards to the families that come to you, they say, look, I've got a family member, I'm worried about them. What is the next step in that journey?
So if a family reaches out, I'll always say, can you put me in touch with that person? So if it's male, I'll reach out. If it's female, we always get a female to reach out.
Would you want the family member to first get permission for that person to reach out to them? Or how would you do it? Like, for example,
how do you mean permission?
For example, say
would you ask it?
Yeah. Would you get
it look, we're sisters, so I know exactly what she's saying. So she means if the family members come to you, and you've got the contact details, would you say to them, look, first talk to that person that I'm going to contact them?
Yeah.
Or do you not wait for that permission? That's what she meant. Does that make sense?
Okay. No, I always do ask them to, because people don't like to be put on the spot. Someone drinking doesn't want their drinking challenged, because that can just shut the door straight away. And sometimes, we'll say, and they'll say, oh no. I always say, look, just give my number as well, because there'll come a point where they'll want to reach out. But there's two parts to it. So I'll always try to connect with the person that's struggling, but I'll also then refer the family to what's called another 12-step fellowship called Al-Anon. So there's family support as well. So obviously you've got support for the alcoholic, but there's also a 12-step fellowship for the family as well. And here in Birmingham, there's been a lot of work around creating Punjabi-focused ones as well. Obviously, there's a challenge there because not everyone lives in Birmingham, but they do online meetings as well. So it's about connecting people into that network so they can start to get that support. Because, somebody that's been through that same experience, it's invaluable having that insight into it, to be honest. And from a connection perspective, just knowing what you're feeling and going through. Because, my doctor would even say, like, you need to cut down your drinking. But my head could rationalize anything because the drink was everything to me at the end. Like you said with the chocolate, that, it's probably not a good idea. But in that moment, you can rationalize any behavior. And that's exactly what I used to do with the drink. But obviously, the consequences were a bit more severe.
In regards to, so if the person then says, okay, fine, Navraj is going to give me a call, what is the conversation like when you call? What do you talk to them about?
So when I connect with them, I start with my story. And what I always tend to do is not actually even mention their drinking. So I'll kind of run through my story and talk about, obviously, my background growing up, what my drinking was like, especially mentioning that I wasn't a daily drinker. I'm an alcoholic, but I wasn't a daily drinker. Very successful in my work, married, family. I had all that. Yet, even though I had all these material possessions, I still lost control of my drink. And, it became a bigger part of my life than everything around it. And it's about connecting with that person and understanding how they're feeling. Rather, everybody else notices the drinking, so the family will notice the drink and stuff. If it's someone that's daily drinking a lot, there will be questions around, because I need to know kind of how much they're consuming, because when somebody starts to drink daily, there's a real danger if they stop suddenly. So if you've continuously been drinking daily and then you suddenly stop, there's a risk of a seizure. Yeah. So I'll always refer people to the local statutory service. So you've got places like CGL, Turning Point, and they're the NHS statutory services that help treat alcohol and addiction. So I'll always say, look, self-refer yourself to them and get medically assessed, because only a doctor can tell you if you're physically dependent.
Can I just ask you, Navraj, in regards to the statutory services, because obviously our target audience for this podcast is South Asians, how culturally aware are those services?
Not particularly.
Okay.
I suppose I'm trying to be polite, but not very. And I think a lot of the work that I do through No More Pretending is try to help them improve their cultural literacy. So it's not only understanding us as a community, but providing them links into the community as well. So if people need help, they can get help. Because when we talk about this, I think when we talk about alcoholism and mental health, there's this surface level analysis where we talk about shame and stigma. Yeah. And it is very important. But I always try push that down the agenda in the conversation, because although shame and stigma play a part of it, it's a universal. It's not something that's specific to South Asian communities. Shame and stigma exist across all of them. We have a unique relationship with shame and stigma because we come from a different social structure. As South Asians, we come from a very hierarchical based structure, and we're very community based as well. Whereas, here you've got the Eurocentric model, very individualistic. So, you've got these different approaches which lead to different beliefs. Yeah. So we have a different relationship with shame and stigma. And the reason I try not to overly talk about it is because a lot of the services then interpret that as we're a hard to reach community, or they won't talk to us because of shame and stigma. I was like, no, that's part of the story. Because I've got families that are crying out for help and they say you're a hard to reach service. Yeah. And what you realize is that actually we've got to meet in the middle. They need to change and we need to make some changes within the community. And it's things like this where we need to address people's misconceptions around what the issue is and what the help is, because help is available out there. There's a lot of work going on to make it more culturally appropriate. But we have to get that message out that it's all right to ask for help.
With the fact that obviously we're in 2023 and your services are based in Birmingham, I think this is a bit of a tough one, but what's your opinion on the fact that we're in 2023 and NHS still isn't culturally appropriate for the South Asian community? I know that's a very direct sort of, because a lot of the services that we speak to, some of them don't even have, we're having conversations in regards to, look, make sure you've got leaflets in the same language. Well, actually, we're second and third generation, so it's not even about that anymore. We haven't moved past it. That's still a big issue. But how are we still having those sort of conversations where you don't have leaflets in Hindi, Punjabi, Urdu? How are we still having those conversations and we haven't even got to the past that surface level? What's your opinion? I know that's a bit of a hard question there.
No, I think it's a great question. I sense,
but it annoys me. That's why I'm asking you the question. That's the frustration.
I sense the frustration and I empathize with it because it's exactly that. And I think in a post-Floyd world, there's a lot more. I think we're in a fertile time for change, where that change hasn't always been there. And I think services are now keen. I think their eyes are a bit more open to kind of this. And what people don't realize is we have a real challenge here in the fact that as people from a South Asian community, we can't just propose a solution. What we have to do is articulate an issue that not everybody experiences. Yeah. And that's a real thing. The first part of it explaining is what is that experience of being from a South Asian community and how does it differentiate us from the others? Because all the services are tailored to just British national people because they're the majority of people that uptake them, and it just reinforces itself. So that's what we need to do is kind of deconstruct what that experience is to help them improve their literacy and do the basics, like, connect them with communities. Even though, we're first and second generation, with the language, what we learned from our work is that actually, even though I don't read or write Punjabi, I still have a strong emotional connection with it. In our recovery meetings in Birmingham, we have the 12 steps in English, but in Punjabi as well. Yeah. I can't read that Punjabi, but there's a strong sense of my identity and like, oh, that's part of me. And a big piece of work we did recently was creating a leaflet saying, does anybody else look like me? Because being from my community, there's a visual difference straight away. We talk about neurodiversity in other areas of, that diversity umbrella, but people don't realize that, even today, I was explaining to somebody at work, I give talks at conferences on the subject that I work in. I work in IT security. And when I walk into a big venue, I still naturally look for another Asian. And my friend was laughing. He says, you wouldn't think it from looking at me, you always look confident. I said, I always do it because it's a natural safety thing, because then I don't feel alone. And when I said that, he was blown away, because unless I explained it, he'd never have access to that experience. And it's about taking things like that to the NHS and making them realize that actually when people walk through the door, it's not just another patient, that you need to do more, and there's different adaptations that you have to do. For somebody in a wheelchair, you need ramps. If there was a set of stairs, you'd go, oh, wait a minute, this isn't working for that person. And it's almost taking that thinking, but listening to the community and what their needs are and adapting the services.
But the other part of this is obviously the fact that within the South Asian community, we are very much inward looking, which is why this podcast went from something that is targeted for the South Asian community, but it is listened by people from outside of the South Asian community as well. So we as a community also need to make that step forward, saying, just like you're doing, Navraj, well, yes, I'm an alcoholic, and explaining what that actually means, because until that happens, it's very hard to break through those barriers that we've got from both sides of the community. In regard, sorry, go on, Navraj.
So it's just, you made me think, like you said, it is on both sides. And as a community, we do need to kind of stop and think and do some work on ourselves. But sometimes you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. So when I got into recovery, what that room of recovery provided me was a space to be open and vulnerable. But as a Punjabi male, I had no idea how to do that. I was sat in this room with people sharing their experiences, and I was just blown away, like, oh my God. And in the early days, my story was almost like a collage of other people's experiences. It was like, oh, that's how I feel, because I didn't know how to express myself emotionally. And it was through the voice, it was through hearing other people's stories from different cultures that I was able to then learn how to articulate my issues. And that's the beauty of it, that, we do talk about, obviously, culturally appropriate services, but underneath it, recovery is recovery. A room full of strangers helped save my life. My first meeting was in the basement of a church. My journey back to my community in Sikhi started in a church basement. Before that, I grew up feeling very marginalized. I didn't feel particularly English, didn't feel particularly Punjabi, so I always felt like I'm on the margins here. But that journey back to that community, it started in the strangest place.
I think quite a lot of us feel like that. We don't know where we sit. We're one foot in this world and one foot in the West and one foot in the East, and kind of feel lost. But I think what you said is really important. A thing that we need to work on, that we don't know how to express ourselves. And that's the first thing, the first issue. And that's why we're having so many suicide rates, male suicide, because we don't know how to express ourselves. And that's something as a community that we need to work on to overcome any of the issues that we've got.
But the other thing you've just said is that you have that space, and a lot of the topics that we've spoken to, especially the last few that have popped in my head, is the fact that a lot of them have said, yes, I go to a psychologist, I go to a counsellor, or I've had this space where it's a men's group where we talk about this. And like you've said, whether it's about alcohol as well, it's about having that space to talk. You don't know what's going to come out of your mouth, but it might shock you with whatever it does come out, which is a really interesting point in itself as well.
So as well as the No More Pretending, I volunteer for Hira and Taraqi, and every month, at the end of the month, the last Wednesday, we run an open men's session. And this is around different topics, and it's creating that space for people to just be able to be open and honest about a variety of topics. And the beauty of this is, and the difference between this and recovery, because obviously recovery is very focused on a specific aspect, and you may share something and people will kind of help and guide you. Whereas with the open groups, it's just a space for people to just speak and let these things out. And because, we don't have all the answers, and sometimes people just need a place where they can, as you talk it out, things start to make sense, or you can kind of rationalize it. And I speak to a lot of people in recovery as well. We always talk about never overthink something yourself, because when something's in your head, it's like fog, it's very amorphous, but as you speak it or write it down, it starts to become a bit more tangible. I might have an issue and I'll ring my sponsor up, and as I'm talking, I'll just start laughing, going, oh, I'm just being a lunatic here. And he'll just laugh. It's just that power of connecting with somebody else and talking. But that facility needs to be there. For me, it was imbued into me as part of recovery. But it's about how we can bring that to the wider community. And have, when I was growing up, we'd be at the Godra and you'd see like mom and grandmas, they're all having a natter while they're making the roti and stuff like that. We need a men's version of that.
But it's all, I mean, I said this on one of our other podcasts, and this turned into a bit of a general podcast now, all of a sudden, an episode. But it's about having that community, because we went to India a little while ago, and the women were singing. We're at the Godwara at this point, and the women had their own section on, and they were having a bit of a gossip and a bit of a natter. But that is their community. So it's not only men, it's women, it's all of us. We need that space where we can connect to people that identify like we do, which is a really important point. And what you've said in regards to Turkey and the Hida Foundation, we do have episodes that we've recorded with them as well. So we will add those in when we release this podcast as well, so people are aware of their organisations as well. As we come to the end of this episode, Navraj, what advice can you give someone that is starting to question whether they are an alcoholic? What should they do next? What are the next steps for them?
I'm always a fan of keeping it simple. Just reach out. Just reach out for help. You know, the worst thing, if you're not. Do you know what I mean? But if you do have an issue, at least there's support there. I think people, it's just such a hurdle just to ask. It doesn't come naturally. And, with alcohol, the way it's such a part of our community and our identity, it's almost second nature. So it almost feels alien to question it. But just the thing that I always say in all my sessions, just reach out, connect with someone else, just have a chat. And, the benefit of that chat, you'll come away with knowing, you might have an issue, or, you might need to turn it. You just might need to just take a break for a bit. Because you have to realize, as an alcoholic, I sit on the extremity of a spectrum. I'm all the way over in the red. You do have people that have problematic drinking, and that could be for a period of time. Maybe say there's a bereavement and they drank, they use that to numb the pain. But then they stopped and went back to normal. That's fine. And you get people like that. So for me, I'm not here to demonize anyone that drinks or to say everyone that drinks, you should stop drinking. For me, I always just say, look, drink's always going to be available around us. But if it's starting to cost you more than money, if it's starting to cost you friends or peace of mind, please just reach out.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Navraj. Like we said earlier, I think these are the podcasts where someone is talking about their own lives. It's always a bit harder than talking to services who are on the other side of it. So we really do appreciate your time and sharing your journey with us as well.
Thank you. No, it's always a privilege to be asked.
That's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.